Episode of Growth Path. Today, I'm super excited to have on a guest that I've spoken to a few times, but never on this particular podcast, across other podcasts though, and also on webinars, etc. And somebody that I've been following for a number of years. Before I even knew Scott was the person behind it, I was following him. Um, so yeah, let me introduce Scott Brinker, who's the is an analyst and advisor at Chief MarTech. Was the VP of platform ecosystem at HubSpot for 8 years. Is now an advisor to Workato. He is the man, the brain, one of the brains behind that large landscape of all that marketing tech that you may have seen floating around the internet over the past, I don't know, 10 years or something like that, 15 years even, right? When the landscape was pretty bare and empty, maybe 15, 16 years ago, to today, where the landscape is full of contours, let's say, if people are familiar with geography, right? And those contours are the ones that are getting closer and closer together. So yeah, it's a steep landscape of various marketing technology, etc. I'd like to welcome Scott Brinker. Welcome to the pod.
Wow, thank you for that incredible intro, Andy. And I feel like I should begin then by apologizing to anyone who has ever looked at that crazy landscape and wanted to pull their hair out from it. So it's not my fault. I'm just reporting.
You're just the storyteller here, man. You're not the person that's made it up, right? It is what it is. But and also just a quick note on that. That was the first time I've ever brought contours into a story there. So people don't know what I'm talking. I was lying in. No,
I'm digging it. Yeah, we could talk fractals.
Stalagmites and stalactites, perhaps, Scott. We'll get into some of that.
Ooh, all right. Yeah.
My geography teacher from school would be very impressed. No, I was lying just before I begin. I was lying in bed last night, and I was actually just scrolling through Reddit. I don't know if you've ever fallen into a Reddit black hole. It's very interesting, right? This is only a recently enough thing for me, Reddit, falling into that black hole. I'm normally a YouTube rabbit hole type of guy, but Reddit. And I seen something that had like, can you tell the difference between these two different landscapes? And it all started flowing back to me. The contours getting closer together means it's steeper. And I said it to my wife. I was like, hey, what do you know what this means? And she was like, of course I know what it means. Like, are you testing my intelligence here? Anyway, that was 2 times in 2 days I've spoken about contours, and haven't done it in nearly 20 something years. But anyway, we'll move on, Scott. Tell us, what are you up to at the moment? Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, well, I just shipped the MarTech for 2026 report. So every 6 months or so, I've been collaborating with Franz Riemersma to produce reports and sort of capture the state of where we're at in the MarTech industry. And I know December tends to be that time frame when everyone's, thinking about the year ahead. Sometimes the predictions get a little too ambitious, I would say, and so what we try and do with like a report like MarTech for 2026 is give people a bit of a view of where we at now, where do we think realistically we're going to be here, particularly over this next 6 to 12 months, not trying to do any sort of like far-flung, futuristic predictions, but really just sort of trying to like sum up an orientation of like, all right, a lot's been happening, here's where we're at. Take a deep breath over the holidays because 2026 is going to.
So let's dig into that a little bit. So you said, okay, where are we at the moment? Like every time I talk to you, it's like, oh, and we have another 250,000 vendors on the market. It's like, shit, Scott, we only spoke like 4 months ago. So like, so where are we? What's the current status quo? What's the current state of affairs?
Oh, we didn't even like run the numbers for like that crazy landscape. I mean, it was over 15,000 in the spring. I'm quite certain it's still well over 15,000. Yeah, rather for this report, it was more of a focus on, what's actually happening with these technologies. And yeah, what we focused on, surprise, surprise, is AI agents, because everyone's been talking AI agents and agentic this and agentic that, and so I really wanted to like take a non-hype lens to like dig into, okay, what's actually happening here? And the core of the report really focuses on three very different kinds or three very different categories of AI agents in marketing. There's agents for marketers, which are these things that help us accelerate the work we do behind the scenes for, everything from brainstorming to, building out creatives and campaigns and running data analysis. we're increasingly using really cool AI agents to help with that work. But those AI agents are purely backstage with us. Then we have these what I would call agents for customers. These are things we still control on the market side, marketer's side. Things like the customer service chatbots and websites, AI SDRs, shopper concierges on e-commerce sites. So we control these, but they're supposedly in the service of helping customers or prospects. But by far the most interesting category is this third category, what we call agents of customers, because these are AI agents that the customers control. They're outside the control of the marketer. They're very often outside the visibility of the marketer. So like when like in B2B, if a prospect is using ChatGPT to do deep research on a category and evaluate like who are the different players and what should I know about them and how do I think about like pricing and discounting in this space, like they can just get a ton of insight and information and go so far down the customer journey where they're using an agent outside of our control. And where things get really interesting is when all these different agents start interacting with each other.
Untrackable as well. This is for the marketer. So that's one of the things that I've been hearing more and more is like, okay, you put all this effort in, but other than like being able to see referrals coming from ChatGPT, for example, to your website, it's very hard. Or maybe you've come across something that's able to show you, okay, what's the ROI of work that we're doing on an AI perspective, other than just seeing referrals come from OpenAI.
Yeah, so this is that whole field that people call
Yeah.
either
Yeah.
AEO for like answer engine optimization or sometimes GEO for generative engine optimization. Let's just go with AEO. And this is kind of seen as a successor to traditional SEO practices, that obviously we've mastered the playbook as marketers over the past 20, 25 years with Google. But the world's changed because people aren't just using the classic Google search with 10 blue links anymore. Even if they're on Google now, they're very likely using like the AI experience in Gemini. And so AEO is this very emerging practice of, as marketers, just like we had to influence Google search with SEO, how do we think about helping to influence the ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or things like that, so that when prospects or customers are asking questions that are relevant to our particular company, our particular field in which we operate, that we're able to show up in there and show up in there correctly? And you're right, it's not that it's completely untrackable. There's a whole category of AEO products out there, things like Scrunch or Profound or all this, that are very much trying to find ways to both do a certain amount of monitoring by running various queries on these things, sort of keeping track of it, but also watching on your website and looking when any of those agentic services are connecting to your website, and in some cases even trying to serve them up content that is formatted and structured specifically in a way to support those AI agents. But this is all a very emerging field, and it's still a moving target because these AI engines just keep changing on such a ridiculously fast pace.
That's very interesting. Like, it's interesting for me to learn from you as well. Like, you've been looking at the MarTech landscape now for what, almost 20 years, something like that? Sorry.
They
You look great though, Scott. It hasn't aged you at all. No, but just looking at it from when when you began, right? What did it look like when you first began? So what are we talking? So knowing you started with Chief MarTech, I'm just looking at it like based on your employment history from LinkedIn. You started Chief MarTech 2008, right?
Yeah.
2008 versus 2025. Like,
what was interesting is when I first started Chief MarTech, it was right around the time that something called the semantic web was being proposed by Tim Berners-Lee. The guy who actually invented the web as we know it. But the web is a very human readable, experience, and so he had a vision of like, okay, yeah, that's good for humans, but wow, if we can provide data and structure and information in a way that's better for machines, boy, we could bring all sorts of cool like automation and services and capabilities to the web. And so he championed this idea of a semantic layer to the web for just that, which I got fascinated with. The big question for me at the intersection of marketing and technology was like, whoa, well, if you're like engaging in the semantic web, you're essentially figuring out how do you use data to these services as a marketing channel. Anyways, this went absolutely nowhere, both the semantic web and, for that matter, my blog at the time. But, over the years, it grew an audience here, around MarTech as we've come to know it. But I was just reflecting on this year that, oh my goodness, all right, where we're in now, it's not the quote unquote semantic web, but everything, that Tim Berners-Lee was talking about of like, okay, well, now can we have a layer to the internet where it really is going to be these agents and these machines, like, in a much more intelligent and automated way, being able to, do services and work for us. And it's kind of happening now. And so, yeah, I'm actually tempted to go back and look at some of those old things I wrote 17 years ago to be like, hey, maybe this is actually
do you think that, like, just on that point, do you think that AI or agents have been missing? Is that like, if you wrote this back 2008, was it something that, like, if you seen it was a vision back then, right, to see which way things were going to be moving in, do you believe it was missing that layer?
This is one of the funny things about technology in general. There's the things that are the most elegant, and there are the things that become the most popular. And sort of the history of technology is something that it's actually relatively unusual for those two things to be the same. And so I would say, the web as it has existed isn't particularly elegant. Anyone who's dug into a bunch of HTML code knows that for a fact. On the other hand, it's obviously incredibly popular. And the semantic web concepts, it was the exact opposite. An incredibly elegant, design idea never became popular. So it's kind of hard to look back and say, like, were we explicitly missing it? I don't know. I mean, I would say all the experience we've collectively had over the past 30 years with the web, on the whole, I think it's been a really great thing. But are we now at a point where we could do better than that? We could have a much more valuable layer to, how we connect with each other, and do business around, around the world. Yeah, and it looks like AI might actually give us this next generation.
I think, well, it is multiplying at a rate of I don't know what at the minute. It is wild. Like, let's talk a little bit about companies in the AI space that are offering agents or all the different types of agents that you've just mentioned there. Right, everybody's offering it. You've got specific companies that are going into that space that you mentioned, for example, in customer care, customer experience, those types of things. As you said, across every marketing automation platform, there's some level of agent now that's telling you, hey, have you looked at this in your campaign? Have you looked at that in your campaign, etc.? I'm wondering at the moment how big the bubble is. Like that's a question, because I always go back to like test the waters with, for example, my wife, right? Tech's not her thing. She's not in tech whatsoever. She's never been in tech. She works in the medical field. All of this is foreign to her. All of this stuff that I do here is all mumbo jumbo nonsense, right? And I tell her about certain companies and I say, hey, look, this particular space is after receiving, I don't know how many trillions in funding in the past couple of months. And she said, hey, Andy, is that sustainable? I said, well, if history has ever taught us anything, it's like, it's always, whenever I speak to somebody that's not in this, another friend of mine's a comedian, and he's asking me, this was about tech in general, there seems to be a lot of funding going around. I'm hearing about funding. It's like a lot of money floating around. Does all that money like really exist? Well, that's an interesting question you answered. Well, sort of, but not really. But the question for me is because we've seen in the software space, like we've seen the bubble burst a few times. So let's take, for example, after COVID, we've seen 2021, 2022, a massive increase in tools, for example, that are focused on the e-commerce space. There was a lot of money dumped into that space because e-commerce needed to catch up with the demand. And in order to catch up with the demand, they invested heavily in software, right? Then the demand started to die away, or it didn't die away. It just didn't get any more. And then people were like, well, all these tools I'm after buying, this isn't making any sense. So let's like divest in tools and like, let's take a little bit of a spring back. And then we've seen that like bubble burst, right? And now with AI, like I'm seeing, I did some reading there recently that I think October there was, it was an incredible sum of money, like 150 billion or something was invested into AI companies in October. November is going to be almost double that. December, I don't know what December is going to be, but like it's multiplying and multiplying every month in terms of the amount of cash that's being pumped into these companies. Basically, a lot of the times on an idea, just because somebody has a good resume or somebody comes from OpenAI or has a Google background, whatever it might be. And there's billions being invested into these companies. The question is, how quick is that bubble going to burst? Because I think it will.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I sort of I do separate it into two different buckets. I feel there's like the actual major AI houses, right? OpenAI, Anthropic, whatever Elon Musk's particular company is at the time. I can never keep track of them all, because these are the ones that are like, I mean, talk about money being either committed or raised or spent at just crazy amounts. And we can kind of put, like Google and Microsoft in that category too. I mean, they're a lot more diversified as businesses go, but if you look at what their actual investments are in AI, it's just insane, the amount of money. I'll be honest, I don't know if that will pay off or not. I'm not in a camp of saying like I'm 100% certain that's going to pay off. I'm also not 100% certain that that it won't pay off. Because the gains that continue to happen here in the capabilities and intelligence of these core models, it's astounding, and even if you start to consider about things, and I'm going to very quickly get outside of my depth, but like you mentioned your wife's in the medical profession, like if they're able to use these engines, for instance, to do an entirely accelerated level of like pharmaceutical research, and like how do we can we cure cancer? I mean, like there's some. I know. I spent my days thinking about like how do we deliver more emails? Somebody out there who really has a good mission in life is like, how do we cure cancer? So, I mean, there could be some really major unlocks with that. There could also be a lot of just nothing, and so who knows? But then when you start talking about like these more AI application companies, yes, there's no doubt it is a bubble in the sense that we've seen this before with MarTech. There will be winners because there are real opportunities to build in this space, but there are more people trying to compete than there are. It's a musical chairs thing. There's only going to be so much money ultimately that is spent and earned on these things. And there's no way that all these companies who are competing on this are all going to win. And so this is the classic VC, startup-ish sort of thing, is everybody's running towards a wall as fast as they can, and some are going to break through and some are going to end up on the concrete.
Yeah, let's see. I mean, it's interesting. It reminds me a lot of if we go back maybe 10, 12 years, something like that. If we look at maybe the ESP space, so email marketing, you just mentioned email there, or marketing automation. And you've got like a couple of bigger players that are breaking away. You've got the sales forces that are just after buying. Was it Eloqua at the time? No, it wasn't Eloqua. Eloqua was bought by Oracle. Salesforce was Pardot. They bought Pardot. Yeah.
And
exactly.
Exact
ET as well.
Yeah,
exactly. And you had like this sort of acquisition starting to happen from these bigger players that are in the CRM space, which was like a side, like a nice complementary product to an ESP. But there was like in that mid-market space, we had like, I don't know, thousands of different companies that were fighting for the mid-market. And it feels as though it's a bit like that, but on like, I don't know, some like hybrid between steroids and crack when it comes to that AI. when it comes, yeah,
And you were on fire with the metaphors
or maybe
today.
speed. Let's call it speed, right? So it just feels as though that this it's really like that with like I don't know like times 1,000. I don't know if you're seeing it the same way, but that's what I'm seeing right now. Is that mid market space, that space like between the enterprise and the mid market. Let's call it upper mid market tier. You're gonna have thousands,
Yeah.
if not hundreds of thousands of companies all fighting for that specific space.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because in many ways AI is so capable of so many things and it gets so much benefit when you connect more things together, particularly, data, that in the old MarTech landscape, there were all these different categories. And while there was definitely some overlap with categories, you would have actually a fair amount of oh well I'm this platform for social and I'm this platform for video advertising and I'm this platform for customer loyalty management, but with AI so much about it is like unifying the data and unifying orchestration. Is what you've got is pretty much everyone in every category is now all trying
Mm-hmm.
to get to the center of this AI orchestration. So it's actually, I mean, from just a structural perspective, the amount of competition for that layer
Wild.
is
Yeah.
unlike
Yeah.
anything ever seen before.
Absolutely. I've got two questions for you, and I'm gonna ask you a pessimistic question and an optimistic question, right? And then we'll finish it. We'll finish on the optimistic
All right.
question, right? The question. So, what are you fearful of for the future, based on all of your experience, everything that you've seen? What's the thing that you are concerned about?
Wow. Okay. Well, this will bring it down pretty quickly, but this is outside of my domain of expertise. But it is the thing I'm most worried about. Is I really do think this is going to have a tremendous amount of structural change to just millions of jobs, and it's going to happen in a time frame that is unlike anything we have any historical precedent for. And so I think what we need more than ever is, frankly, some really good government leadership and government programs to help society make this transition. And unfortunately, without getting political on any of this, I'll just say, for the most part, I'm seeing most governments behave in a fairly dysfunctional way. And so at the very time when I think society really needs, good government to help with this transition, in many ways, I think we're least prepared to actually rise to that mission. And yeah, that has me pretty,
I would
pretty concerned.
fully agree with that. I think that the people in power have no idea what we're facing. They can't even comprehend what we're facing. So I fully, and that's not just the states. That's everywhere. It's everywhere.
Yeah, no, it is
It's
around the world. I have very few governments, or administrations. I look at them like, well, these guys haven't figured out. They're on top of it. Can
if
we
the
follow that
yeah.
lead?
I mean,
So let's hope we get some sense about that
I
in
mean, if
2026.
if the pandemic showed us anything, is that governments are really underprepared for things that come at us like that. And I mean, the AI thing has been coming for a while, but it's coming at an accelerated speed, and the way that it's progressing is wild. And I'm not sure that there's any government on the planet that's prepared for that. That's a very interesting point. Then, on a higher note, though, Scott, right? So let's assume that the government fixes it all. I'm sure they know what they're doing. They know it's all fine. I wouldn't worry. What's the thing? What's the thing you're most hopeful about? What do you think coming into 2026 and knowing everything you know? What's the thing you say? Okay, look, there's a bright light here.
I think it is going to be an amazing time for people who are creators. And I think it's going to be people who had the potential to be creators but didn't have the resources or some of the intermediary skills needed to deliver on their vision. There's like just so much potential for people to realize their ideas and their dreams and create things. And I'm really excited about that. I mean, certainly it's for the people who are already creators. I think they're going to get a boost. But I also think it is going to imbue many, many more people with the ability to realize their own creative dreams. I think we're going to see some
That's a
amazing things.
fantastic end note on that. Scott, the godfather of MarTech, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on, Scott. It's been a great pleasure as always. If people want to find you, where can they get you?
Let's see, I guess on LinkedIn, as SJ Brinker. And then you can also visit my blog, chiefmartech.com, without the H at the end. Chiefmartech.
Thank you so much.
Perfect. Story for another day. Thanks for having me, Andy.
Scott, it's been a great pleasure as always. And hey, you were actually guest number 50 on this podcast. So I'd like to mark the occasion. Thanks a million for coming on. Thanks for being guest number 50. It's really important to get a legend on for number 50. And we managed to secure you. Thanks a million for spending the time with me today, Scott. I really appreciate it.
You're very kind, my friend. Have wonderful holidays. Best wishes.
And to you, my friend. Guys, this has been another episode of Growth Path. Tune in again next week for more great content. Scott, thanks a million.